Do you want to learn Daf Yomi but have no idea how the page layout of the Talmud actually works? Or perhaps you've been learning the Talmud mostly in English and you want to switch to the original Hebrew and Aramaic? Or perhaps you have seen or heard of the Daf Yomi program and you are curious what it's all about and how it actually works. If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you are most certainly in the right place. Many people, Baruch Hashem, is learning Daf Yomi, which is a page of the Jewish oral law, also called the Talmud, every single day. If you do one page, the back and the front of the page, you will complete it in about 7.5 years. Alternatively, you can do one Amud a day, which is one side of a daf or page a day, which means you will complete the Jewish oral law in 15 years. I know, that's a lot of years, but the only way to get there is to start, which is often the most difficult step, especially if you feel intimidated just looking at the page. If you can't read Hebrew or understand Aramaic, or you don't know how to read Rashi script, then you can still learn the Talmud in English. I made a video of how to learn the Talmud in English and I will link the video above. But for those like myself that is switching to learning mainly in Hebrew and Aramaic in its original form, this video is most certainly for you. So what you can see on the side here is a Amud, or is one side of a page. Now at first glance it does look very confusing, but once you know how the layout of this page actually works, it is actually very simple. So let's start at the very top of this page and let's go step by step and explain everything on this daf. So the first thing on the left hand side at the top of the page, which is numbered 1, we see a kaf and a hay. Now this is the number of the daf. So kaf is 20 as the numerical value of 20 and hay has the numerical value of 5. This is also the gematria of the letters. So this would then be page 25. Then if we move to the middle of the page, to the top, you will see there's a number 2 with 3 arrows. And this is basically the heading of the daf. So reading from right to left, as one does in Hebrew, we see that it starts with HaKoreh Amud. Now this HaKoreh Amud is actually part of the first sentence of chapter 3 of Masechet Megillah. And I will read you the full sentence so you have a broader view of exactly how they do it. And it reads, HaKoreh et HaMegillah Omed V'Yoshev, which in English is translated as, do you read the Megillah standing or sitting? And you will see at the top of the page it is shortened and it just says HaKoreh Omed, the reading standing. What we see in the middle is Perek, which is the chapter, and Shlishi, which is 3. So this would be chapter 3. And then next to that, we see Megillah. And the Megillah is the Masechet that we are dealing with. And Megillah basically deals with the reading of the Megillah during the festival of Purim. The next number that we are going to look at is number 3. And this whole block that you see here is basically the text of the Gemara and the Mishnah. The Mishnah being in Hebrew, which is from the Tanaim, people that lived in the Second Temple period, and the Gemara is in Aramaic. And this does include some Tanaim, but also Amoraim and many other commentators on the Daf. Now many of you might not know this, but the book of Daniel as well as the book of Ezra, was also written in Aramaic, as that was the language commonly spoken in the time of the Second Temple period and after the Second Temple period. Now the next number we're going to look at on this daf is number 4, and you will see there in bold a gimel and a mem, and that is where the Gemara actually starts. And if you look further down, you will see a mem, a taf, a nun, and a yud, and that is where the Mishnah will start. Now the next number we're going to look at is number 5, and this is punctuation that is used within the Gemara and Mishnah text. Now if a colon is used, it indicates that it is the end of a paragraph, very similar to the use of a period or a dot in modern day punctuation. A period or a dot in a daf of Gemara actually indicates a comma that we would be using in modern day punctuation. The next number we're going to look at is number 6, and you will see that there's a word there in brackets. Normally brackets within the Gemara text indicates an addition to the text, meaning that it's probably some other source or manuscript that the rabbis felt should be included but was not part of the original text. If it is in parentheses, then normally it means there is some doubt about this word, with some people believing that it should either be deleted or replaced by a different word. Then we move on to number 7, and this is the commentary by one of the greatest commentators on the Talmud, Rashi. Now Rashi can always be found closest to the binding of the book, where Tosafot, which we will discuss later, is always on the outside of the page, so the furthest away from the actual binding of the book. Now I can tell you from someone that has been learning for quite a few years that it is almost impossible to understand the Gemara without Rashi. And that is why Jews rely so heavily on Rashi to know what the text is actually saying. Because the Gemara and the Mishnah, to some extent, writes extremely briefly. And we don't even know what all the words in the Gemara actually means, unless we have Rashi, which Baruch Hashem we have. Also, just to make this video as accurate as possible, I must tell you that not all the dafs that have a Rashi was actually Rashi. The first example is Bava Basra, which was not written by Rashi, but was actually written by his grandson, Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir. The next example is Masechet Makot, which was partially written by Rashi, but was completed by his son-in-law, Rabbi Yehuda ben Natan. And in some cases, like in Masechet Ta'anit, that deals mainly with fasting, some of the commentary was written under Rashi's name, but it was actually done by his students. And that is the next number that we are going to discuss, which is number 8. We have Tosafot, which is basically the descendants of Rashi or his students. And that is basically the basics of the main page. But then also, Baruch Hashem, we have on the sidelines of the page many different commentaries and references. And this do differ from Talmud to Talmud, but most do follow a very similar structure. The next number we're going to look at is number 9. And you will see there in Rashi script, very small in brackets, written Tehillim Kuf Mem Zain. And this is a reference to the book of Psalms 147. Now this was not part of the original daf, but was later added by other rabbis. And this is something that I have mentioned in some of my other videos on the Talmud. The Jewish oral law is based heavily on the Jewish written law. And thus you will often find sources throughout the daf that shows you where to look in the Tanakh. The next number we're going to look at is number 10. Now the commentary of Rabeinu Chananel is mainly found in the Vilna editions of the Talmud, which is many of the Talmuds that we use today. He also lived about 1,000 years ago in North Africa. So basically he lived in a similar time period as Rashi. But unlike Rashi, he doesn't comment on everything in the Gemara and the Mishnah, basically clarifying the principle of what these passages or sections are saying, and basing it heavily on the Geonim. And many of his commentaries can also be found in the Aruch, which is an 11th century work from Rome. The next number we're going to look at is number 11. And this is a section that I use quite a lot. And this section basically gives you the Halacha, what the final ruling is according to Jewish law. Now the way you find this Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah is normally there is a small Hebrew letter within the Gemara or the Mishnah text. And then that same Hebrew letter can be found in this Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, and there it will give you the final Halacha, the final Jewish law. This could also be confusing because it doesn't literally write there Mishneh Torah or Shulchan Aruch, but it gives you abbreviations. Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah basically uses three sources. It uses the Rambam's Mishneh Torah, and Rambam's full name is Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. And the abbreviation that you find in this section for the Mishneh Torah is Mem Yud Yud, which actually stands for Maimon. It also gives you the chapter number as well as in what section of the Mishneh Torah it can be found. Now there is 14 books of the Mishneh Torah, and some of the books have more than one section. Now the Ein Mishpat already assumes that you know where that section is within these 14 books. So sometimes it does take a bit of searching. The next source in number 11 that is often used is Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, which is a book that contains the 613 mitzvot. And it was written by Rabbi Moshe of Kuchi in the 13th century. The third source used in the section 11 is of course the Shulchan Aruch, which was written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, who lived about 500 years ago and compiled the book, which is today the codified book of Jewish law. And basically Rabbi Yosef Karo took three opinions: the Rambam, the Rosh, and the Rif. After publishing the book, the Rama, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, commented on the Shulchan Aruch, and his comment appears at the top. Now the Rama is normally the opinion that us Ashkenazim follow. Now I already made a video on this, which is called How Do Jews Get Jewish Law, which I will link above. But basically, for those that do not know, the Shulchan Aruch is based heavily on the Torah. So the reference that we will find in section 11 is Tet Vav Shin, abbreviation mark Ein. And the Tet and the Vav stands for the Torah, and the Shin and the abbreviation with the Ein stands for Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, which is based on the Torah, has 4 sections, and that will be the next source indication in number 11. The first section we have in the Shulchan Aruch, which is the one that is mainly studied, because that deals with everyday life, is Orach Chaim. And that is indicated with Aleph Vav abbreviation Chet. The next section in the Shulchan Aruch is Yoreh Deah, which deals with other laws that does not necessarily always affect us in our daily life. Just so by the way, it is in this section where conversion law is described, which is in Yoreh Deah 268 CF2. Yoreh Deah is indicated by Yud Vav abbreviation mark Dalet. The next source is Eben HaEzer, which is abbreviated as Aleph Hey abbreviation mark Ein. And the last part of the Shulchan Aruch is Choshen Mishpat, dealing with monetary claims and damages. And that is abbreviated as Chet Vav abbreviation mark Mem. Now what you will also sometimes find, it will give you a source from the Mishneh Torah, so abbreviated Mem Yud Yud, and then it will tell you where that source is, in what section of the Mishneh Torah, but not indicating you the book. And then it will give you the chapter, and then later on it will reference that again with Mem Yud Yud, and then you will see written there Shin Mem, which is Sham, there, meaning the reference that was already given before from the Mishneh Torah, so the section in the Mishneh Torah, that source is the same source as the source that was given above, with perhaps a different chapter number. The next number we're going to look at is number 12. In that middle little gap, you will see there written at the top, that is Torah Or, which literally translates as the light of the Torah. And that gives you the sections or references to where this appears within the Torah itself, which is also an invaluable resource that I use a lot. And since we are on the subject of references to the Torah, to the Tanakh, you will often find sources to the Torah or the Tanakh in Tosafot or in Rashi, so in the outside of the page or the inside of the page, in brackets, which just shows you again that the Jewish oral law always refers back to the written law. Now again, if you do find the word written Shin Mem, it means it's in the same source that was listed earlier on. And now we move on to the inside of the page, number 13, right at the top. That is Masoret HaShas. Now the word Masoret means tradition, and HaShas means the Talmud, the entire Talmud. Shas actually stands for Shesh Sedarim, the 6 orders, because the Talmud consists of 6 orders that it deals with the last order being very well known, Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers. Basically, what number 13 does, it is the tradition of the Talmud. And this will give you other references where this has been mentioned within the Talmud. The next number we're going to look at is number 14, which is Hagahot, HaBach. Now, this section, which was written by Rabbi Yoel Sirkis from Poland in the 17th century, is basically corrections or alternative suggestions to the text of Rashi, Tosafot, as well as the main text of the Gemara. Because the Talmud page never actually changes and is basically copies from one another, there is quite a few spelling mistakes that has been preserved, as the actual page cannot be changed. The next section we're going to look at is number 15, which is Hagahot, HaGra. And this, very similar to Hagahot, HaBach, is also a correction on the text of the Gemara or Rashi or Tosafot. Being the Gra is much more assertive in his language. For those of you that do not know, the Gra, as he is commonly called, is HaGaon Rabbi Eliyahu, also called the Vilna Gaon, who lived in the 18th century and was one of the biggest rabbis that ever lived. Just as a point of reference, is also the rabbi that led the fight against the Hasidic movement that emerged with the Baal Shem Tov. He fought the Hasidim until his dying day, as he felt that the Hasidim was not following the orthodox traditions or way of life, and feared that this might lead to a split within the Jewish community. And I think that just shows you the vision that the Gra had so many years ago. The next section we're going to look at, number 16, which is called the Gilyon HaShash. This section was written by Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and he lived in the 19th century. And basically, what Rabbi Akiva Eiger does is he basically raises contradictions or questions within the actual text of the Gemara and Mishnah, or Rashi or Tosafot, but he never actually resolves these contradictions or difficulties, many times ending with this needs further investigation or this requires significant further investigation. Now, many books have been written on this commentary called Gilyon HaShas, where they try to find solutions to the contradictions or the questions raised by Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And the last section of the Daf, number 17, Hagahot Rav B. Ronsberg. And these are the corrections of Rabbi Betzalel Ronsberg that lived about 200 years ago, where he also has corrections on Rashi, Tosafot, and the main section of the page. And that is basically the layout of a daf or a page of Talmud. All that is left for you to do is to actually go and study it. And like I said, if you feel your Hebrew is not good enough, or your Aramaic is not good enough, or you don't know how to read Rashi script, then I suggest that you start learning the Talmud in English. If you want to know how to learn the Talmud in English, you should definitely watch this video next.